when Pat sent me this topic, Revolt in West Africa, Causes and Consequences, plus discussion on recent BRICS and G20 summit, my immediate reaction was revolt in West Africa. Is there a revolt in West Africa? I'm aware there have been some coups in a number of countries and brought to the fore some leaders that are making interesting statements and taking interesting actions. Is that a revolt? Okay. What is clear is that the developments in the region vary across countries and depend on their colonial history. What do I mean? Ghana, the situation in Ghana and Nigeria is different from Burkina Faso and Niger. Yeah. And the interest in the coup d'etats in those three countries is primarily because of the rhetoric that is coming out of their leadership. Yeah. Now, what is also very common across the region, which I can say is typical of a revolt, is what me and Yoda were talking about yesterday. It looks like the people are voting with their feet. You visit the embassies in Accra, and it looks like the whole of Accra is looking for a visa to get out. Everybody is asking for a visa to leave the country. So to that extent, I can say that is a widespread West Africa issue. People generally feel that liberal democracy has failed them. They are disappointed, and they don't see themselves having a future in their country. I'm happy to see that Peter Goebbels has joined. I was just mentioning your name. I'm just making some preliminary remarks. Now, what has emerged following the coup d'etats in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, you realize that I'm not mentioning Gabon, is that it's quite clear that France has lost the Sahel region. What I mean by lost the Sahel region is that the popular masses are fed up with France. And there have been a number of incidents along the way, right from the time of Mali, except the coup in Mali, we suggested that the ordinary citizens are saying enough is enough. And the level of anger among ordinary citizens has created a certain sense of responsiveness by the leadership, in a sense that some of them are mobilizing this discontent, as in the case of Niger, to try and bring pressure to bear on the French authorities. To summarize, if we are looking at revolt in West Africa, we have to be cautious what we mean by revolt. If we are looking at the causes and consequences, that is the different level of analysis, which I will move to shortly. To look at the causes and consequences, I have adopted in this presentation a historical approach. I've tried to rely on political economy analysis, and I've tried to situate it within the context of the struggles for global hegemony. What do I mean by this framing? You see, for those of us who are familiar with the West Africa region, you have had Anglophone West Africa and Francophone West Africa. Francophone West Africa was generally a large expanse of different countries ruled by France from Dakar in what was determined as the system of direct rule, i.e., you had French administrators directly ensuring that French interest and presence was felt. In fact, if you go through the literature, I mean, they ensured that village groups mobilized food items for the French administrative systems. And they made sure that, by and large, the kind of systems that were prevalent in France were adopted in their colonies. Today, we have Niger, Mali, Burkina. At the time, it was just all French West Africa. Now, that pattern of colonial rule has had an impact on the consciousness of the people of the area and on subsequent political developments. In contrast, the British had what was called indirect rule, i.e., they worked through the chiefs, made sure that they subjugated the chiefs, and turned them into instruments of their colonial policy. By the time they took over what has now become Ghana, the dominant kingdoms were the Ashanti and the Dagomba, and the few other, all of them were subjugated militarily. They encountered other groups that did not have centralized authority, like the part of the country that we come from. And the only closest ones there were the Mampushi kingdom as well. And in 1931, for example, the British colonial government unilaterally arrogated those parts that did not have chiefly authority to be subjugated under the Mampushi kingdom. And that situation has generally persisted and created a lot of discontent. What I'm doing is showing the differences between Francophone West Africa and Anglophone West Africa and the impact that it has had going forward. Apart from that, I've also mentioned political economy analysis. You have to understand what has happened in the West Africa region and the different modes of incorporation to explain the level of anger that is being felt in the former French countries. I have some documents in front of me here, and some of them are mind-boggling. Those who have been familiar with this Zimbabwean woman, Arikama, and her anger against French colonial policy, the 11 secret agreements between France and Africa. Some of them are just, I didn't believe that they were true. And I asked Yoda to send me the draft, and they are mind-boggling in a sense that the colonial debt for repayment of the benefits of colonization, that those that were being given independence had to sign up to that, automatic confiscation of national financial reserves, the right of first refusal on any raw or natural resources discovered in the country, priority to French interests and companies in public procurement and public tenders, exclusive right to supply military equipment and train military officers of the colonies, the right of France to deploy troops and intervene militarily in the country to defend its interests, the obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language for education, the obligation to use the CFA francs, the obligation to send to France an annual balance sheet and a reserve status report, to renounce any military alliance with other countries unless authorized by France, the obligation to ally with France in the event of war or global crisis. I've gone in detail in reading these things out to try and explain the level of anger that has emanated once the citizens have become familiar with the conditions under which they were supposed to be independent. And it is that which probably is creating a condition for what is close to a revolt. Because as far as I am concerned, it cannot be the same going forward as far as France is concerned. Now, to try and demonstrate the way in which this mindset or this colonial agreement has been implemented, I have another document here with me, which I initially dismissed as probably social media, how do you call it? Social media, you have to be careful what you read. Is a secret defense operation Phoenix, August 2023. Reading through it and looking at what has happened, I'm inclined to believe that this is actually a manifestation of the colonial pact, that France was exercising its right to intervene militarily to defend its interests. The document analyzes the various countries involved by name, their roles. You have France, mercenaries, ECOWAS, and the different countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Nigeria, Senegal. And they have more or less analyzed the situation and said that, look, the coup d'etats in Mali and Burkina Faso have put French interest in Africa seriously under question, in general, and in particular in the Sahel. France has invested significant resources, human, logistic, and financial, for several decades in protecting its interests. And it now seems clear that these coups d'etats are in the process of more or less destroying what has been built over the years. The developments are likely to affect the whole of humanity, and there is an urgent need for reorganizing to address the situation in Niger and to ensure that French interests are protected. I'm just giving a summary overview of the document, but basically it is a document prepared to assess the capability to intervene militarily, looking at the various countries, the various forces, the mercenaries they will recruit, an assessment of their strength, the constraints that they will face, etc., 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 etc. Quite clearly, this is a serious document, considering what has happened so far. Why has it been necessary for France to do this, to plan seriously to intervene, to put pressure on ECOWAS to play the lead role intervening? Because they quite understand that they cannot come in directly. Why do they need to do this? I was having a conversation with Yoda yesterday, and he said what was quite clear is that despite terrorism, business was flourishing for France. The French companies continued to operate, and they were getting the amount of wealth that they thought they deserved. Therefore, the economic interests have shaped the policy decisions that France has pursued. The economic interest informs the level of anger that is felt among citizens of the Sahel. The economic interests of France have affected the way in which the relations between the different countries have unfolded. It's interesting now that with the three countries taking the lead, these are beginning to change. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger recently signed an agreement to come to each other's help. They have also signed an agreement to float a new currency among them. These are significant developments. As to how that will unfold going forward, we're still studying the situation. But the fact that some countries within ECOWAS are beginning to say, listen, the status quo is no longer acceptable, and we're going to go our way. And I think that is significant. Whether they will succeed or not is a different question altogether. It is also important to understand the developments in the Sahel within the context of the struggle for global supremacy, with the US, NATO, and the West on one side, and with Russia, China, and its allies on the other side. It is now becoming apparent that West Africa is the testing ground for dominance of one side or the other. To the extent that the US reached an agreement through Victoria Nuland with the Niger authorities to allow them to fly their drones from the Agadez base. In return, the US will not support ECOWAS in its war effort, and Niger should undertake not to sign up to Wagner support. What does that mean? You see, the struggle for global hegemony led by the US has been unfolding a long time. AFRICOM is a manifestation of the extent to which the United States views Africa and has tried to configure the continent in a manner that suits its interest. I recall not too long ago, in the name of fighting jihadists, there was African military exercises in Accra involving coastal, the Navy, etc., and it was along the coast. And I said, well, these jihadists are not going to come by sea. What are they doing? Doing military exercises, joint military exercises in the coast. The point I'm making here is that a lot of what is happening in the sub-region has to be situated within the broader context of the global struggle for supremacy, with the US, NATO, etc. on one hand, and with Russia, China, and its allies seen as adversaries. What is happening in the sub-region now gives enough for all of us in the sub-region to be concerned about. We have every reason to want to know, how is this going to unfold? Yes, soldiers have taken over in these countries, and the rhetoric and statements coming out from Burkina Faso and Mali has kind of endeared them to quite a significant number of the citizens. Some people have described the new Burkina Faso leader as a new Sankara. The decisions that have been taken by those leaders, I dare say, are heartwarming. They have abrogated these colonial agreements signed with France, and they have asked the French to leave. As you are well aware, in Niger, the French decided that they were not going to leave. And the consequence was for the military authorities to use mass mobilization to put pressure on them to leave. The countries too have signed a new defense pact to come to each other's assistance in the event of an attack. Now, as to whether that will materialize or not will depend on the degree to which the situation unfolds. Going forward, how do I see the sub-region unfolding? From my perspective, the objective conditions for radical transformation are more or less there. High levels of unemployment, dissatisfaction with liberal democracy, anger with France, disappointment in the political institutions that have taken, I mean, if you take the case of Ghana, people are completely fed up with the political class. But objectively, we are still in trouble. Progressive forces have fragmented. There is no political grouping that commands significant support among the citizenry that is emerging in the sub-region to provide leadership. And there is a danger that when you have the military providing that leadership, it will sooner than later run aground. It will run aground because the military mindset is a command obedience model. A command obedience model does not tolerate debate and discussion. It is configured in terms of enemies and friends. When you have that scenario, the rights of citizens to articulate their views, to debate and to discuss, to come to a common agreement on what is best in the country is very quickly stifled. In addition to that, when you have a group of soldiers that come to power, they very quickly attract a civilian support base. Now, what is interesting about that civilian support base is that very frequently, these are people who are looking for power and influence and are able to say the right things at the right places to the ears of those in power. Very often, many of them do not have any legitimacy outside even their homes, but they can mount platforms, give wonderful speeches, and express the kind of views that will inspire people. In reality, they do not have any constituency to talk about. What are the implications of this going forward? We all know that the situation in the sub-region or in the Sahel and West Africa in general is bad. Economically, everything. Life is very, very difficult. It is unlikely that this situation will change anytime soon. There is not going to be any radical increase in the number of jobs. Socioeconomic conditions that make lives livable are not going to be improved dramatically. So we face a situation whereby there seems to be hope, but the vehicle for transforming that hope does not exist. That is what I meant by the objective conditions are ripe, but the subjective conditions are not in place. This may sound like a doomsday scenario, but I do think that on balance, there is a sufficient interest in dialogue and discussions in the sub-region. And I do not think that there's going to be any war in West Africa. I do not believe that the threat to invade Niger is going to materialize. And in the absence of war, the opportunity to talk and discuss and debate, the opportunities for groups to organize are spaces that we need to occupy. For those who have the intentions, the good intentions of the sub-region at heart, this is about the time to say, look, there is a vacuum that is being created. It's important that we recognize the vacuum, go among the ordinary citizens, help them understand their reality, let them realize that, look, all is not lost yet, but we have to be cautious on the extent the people in arms are capable of delivering on their promises. I think I will just leave it at this for now, and in the conversation and discussions, if there are questions, issues to raise, we can talk about it. Pat.
Thanks very much, Nico. That was a good start. Okay, so maybe before we get into discussion, sometimes we mix all this up, but I think in this particular case, probably there are a lot of questions. So perhaps we could have a round of questions, and it doesn't have to be Nico who answers them all. That could then lead into discussion from other comrades. How do you feel about that? Would that be good? Yeah? Is that okay? All right, so I've got a whole group of questions, but I'll save them for a bit later. Who would like to come and ask Nicholas, or you can address the questions to the whole group, to anybody, right? Exactly. So go ahead. Who would like to? Okay, Peter, go ahead, man, Peter. Peter, your microphone is not working. Do you want to? What we'll go on to somebody else, but how can? Yeah. Try again. No.
Peter.
All right. If you go down into the bottom left hand of your screen, if you're using a laptop or a computer,
yeah, he's
click in your.
He's
not muted. He's not muted. I don't think. No, he's not muted. No. So you've obviously not got your microphone switched on. So, often the computer throws up the several different choices. So if you can go down into the bottom left-hand corner and click in that little chevron that goes up like that, and it will list the microphones that you've got available, and maybe check to see one that will work, and then see if it's giving any reaction. Yeah. Okay. We'll come back to you. All right, Peter. All right. We're not hearing you, unfortunately. Now you've muted. Now you muted yourself. I don't mean, don't click on the mute button. Click on the little chevron next to it, and that gives you a list of microphones. All right, that are available in your system. See if you can find some solution. Okay, who else would like to say something before Peter comes back, if he gets it sorted out? Anybody? Anybody like to come in with some questions? Don't hold back. And unmute yourself when you want to speak. Yoda, can we hear you? I remember we were having problems earlier again with the microphone. You'd think, by the way, you'd think that after all this time now that Zoom would have a more user-friendly way of dealing with this thing, because they know that people have problems with the microphones a lot. You know? Never mind. All right. Well, I'll throw in just a few questions that spring to my mind. Just one point that when I listened to Nico talking about what the army is like when they take over, even if they're led by potentially radical leadership, the dangers that come with the limitation of army soldiers' mentality, and also all the people who fasten onto them. I guess the comrades from Ghana will have got quite a lot of experience from what happened when Rawlings took over. So they would have personal experience of what happened to attest to that. So that was just one general point. I wondered if Nico has any examples, or anybody else have any examples of the ripping off of these countries in West Africa of their raw materials. You know how the old model of these countries using their continuing power after independence, these ex-colonial ex-imperialist powers in Europe and America, using their power to ensure that they got cheaper than the market rate for the raw materials, and also the problem of how that then plays into the wholesalers part of the chain, and then how that then plays into the process of taking the raw materials to Europe or America or wherever, and then refining or processing them there, and selling them on the market as finished products, and that's getting a lion's share of the profit. If they've got any examples of that that they could give, that's one question. The other question was whether this development is reviving Pan-Africanism, if the comrades have got any knowledge about that. Also, Nico was mentioning about there being, it being a bit of a bleak future economically, which will cause a lot of problems for these new governments, even with the best of intentions to make a way forward. Whether the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS offers any hope for at least maybe not in the near future, but in the medium-term future, for these governments to improve their revenue from the sale of their raw materials, also for the better exploitation of the raw materials in terms of mining and whatever else it might be, agriculture and so on, and also the question of producing, helping to get refining and processing done locally rather than in the richer countries. And the last question was, Nico had posed this question about reaching out to the mass of people, and the opportunities this might afford in this situation of rising consciousness and discontent. I was going to just ask a simple question of how are ordinary people in this region getting their news nowadays? Is it still through the mass media and television and so on, or are they increasingly getting it through social media? And if it's in terms of social media, how are they getting it through? Are they getting it through Facebook? Are they getting it through YouTube or whatever? Okay, those are my set of questions. Okay. So any other?
That's a lot of questions.
I know,
but I can't remember any of them.
Well, you should have a pen and paper. Old technology. Sorry about that.
So you have to repeat them as we go along.
Notice Hillary put some questions on the chat.
Ah, good. Okay, Hillary, yeah. Let's have a look at that now. Let's have a look. Okay.
Can I come in maybe if you?
Yeah, and go ahead, man. Go for it.
Yeah. In terms of the subjective factor that at times mentioned, is extremely crucial and very important. We have had the situation of two, you can call them two progressive coups, the Achampong coup in Ghana and the Rawlings coup, and all of them failed and led to more of neo-colonial penetration. My fear is, though the right noises are being made, to what extent can the military and left-wing forces, I know at times have a fair amount of knowledge of the left in Burkina Faso. I don't know about Mali. So to what extent is the left involved in these struggles? I think we also had a contact who was in Mali, isn't it? To what extent are these people involved and whether they can support? The other issue is also on the economic front. I mean, it's not easy. You know, all these countries that we are talking about are landlocked. You know, they have to carry goods all the way from the coast to the south. To what extent Mali may have the advantage of Algeria being friendly, but a lot of the ECOWAS countries, Abidjan, I think Benin too. Benin, I don't think Benin is sympathetic because I think the France was doing something with Benin, and Ghana and Nigeria, you know, are very hostile. You know, to what extent getting goods up to those territories could be a problem. You know, to what extent will this problem not create so much problems, and these countries may soon be running back, you know? And then the other issue too we can talk about or discuss is the role of France. It seems some of these army people too were trained, not France, United States. The role of U.S. dish France for their own interest. U.S. have been found like the Australian case, they did that to France. Would they continue to do that? Yeah. So these are my initial comments and questions. Yeah.
Can I make some quick response? I certainly follow the political developments in the French West African countries, particularly Burkina and Mali, and to a limited extent, Benin. Sadly, fragmentation is characteristic. Political fragmentation of progressive forces is characteristic across the board. Burkina Faso is a predominantly peasant country, but has a very vibrant political culture with far more communist parties than workers. It looks like the ability to debate and discuss, which is a very positive thing, has not generated a need to build a unifying force capable of intervening with one voice. The same situation is in Mali. I mean, some of the people that I knew at the time, they've all fallen into different political camps. My view is that what is responsible for that situation is the political elite have a tendency to talk to themselves and not to the masses of the working people. That as soon as they begin to organize and talk to ordinary people, they'll realize that their discourse does not wash. Including myself, we have not demonstrated that we are able to win hearts and minds of ordinary people. And our task now is to do just that. If you sit like I do in the capital, talk on Zoom as I talk, I face the challenges I face when I go out and I meet ordinary people in their communities and realize that, wow, it's not that easy. They insist that I must buy them drink. And I say, look, I don't want to buy drinks because that is what has generated the situation. The political class uses drinks and material inducements to corrupt and buy you. The long and short of what I'm saying in response to what Ian has said is, in terms of the overview, is that the subjective factors need a lot of work. Pat did mention BRICS. As part of my presentation, I did mention that the struggle unfolding in the Sahel is a battle for global hegemony. And BRICS is cast within that frame as well. Like I mentioned, one of the conditions for the Americans brokering a relationship with the Niger authorities is not to invite the Russians. I talked to some people in Nigeria, and there is the view that the Russians must not be allowed anywhere near. Basically, what I'm saying is that global superpower politics is permeating our discourse. What is not given significant importance is what we ourselves define as our interest and our ability to do things in our own interest. That does not mean that we should not build alliances, not at all. But I'm responding to Pat's issue of BRICS. If is it Belt and Road Initiative? I've forgotten the term of the Chinese initiative to create a linkage globally. Certainly, many of the countries of Africa, etc., have benefited a lot from Chinese support. However, those of us in Ghana who have been at the front line of Chinese companies operating in communities feel that their interventions does leave a bitter taste in our mouths. They are extractive, and they take as much as they can and as quickly as possible. Pat mentioned the economic looting. I don't know if Yoda is still connected, but we did chat about this yesterday. And quite clearly, despite terrorism in the Sahel, business could not have been better for French interests. Of course, the situation is changing now. And if you look at the motives behind the French reaction in Niger, is because they feel that they are losing control of their economic advantage that they have had. I read out the colonial agreements, and this is quite clearly a demonstration of economic stranglehold. I don't think, Pat, you need any more evidence than that. All that you need to know is that France reserves the right, the first right of refusal for any natural resources that are discovered. And their companies are expected to be given the first right of awards. I think, let me stop here. I hope others who are equally more knowledgeable in the region can come in here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just wish to add one point before I go. I told you, I had another meeting at 3. Yes, the economic aspect of this domination, of the reason why France doesn't want, to leave Africa. Okay, so the case in Niger is quite obvious, but you see the reaction to the coup in Gabon has been different because they did not threaten any French interests. Okay, so the French, they have two different
they have different positions here. They seem to have accepted the one in Gabon because the interests are not threatened, which is not the case in Niger. Now, this domination, it goes beyond dominating the countries, even our regional organizations. We've seen how ECOWAS has been implementing French policies or politics. Recently, there had been a meeting. I don't know if you have heard about this, OWADA. It is a regional organization for harmonizing business law in West Africa. Now, that meeting, it was only last week. They had to appoint new directors, and the French insisted. They had their own candidates. And at the end of this meeting, Mali and Burkina made a declaration condemning the way, the procedure of appointing the new officials for this, regional organization has been conducted. The appointments had been influenced by France. So if you are not clearly, pro-French, okay, your chances, of getting a position in such an organization, is quite nil. So, it's not only dominating the countries, even our organizations. We don't own our regional organizations. Okay, that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Joda, before you go quickly, I got a question sent to me. Is there an anti-French feeling in West Africa?
No, not at all. There is a feeling against the French, policies in West Africa. Okay, in Burkina and Ouagadougou, we have French people, living. As a matter of fact, I will send you. There are some French people living in Burkina Faso who recently, the declaration was made only yesterday, condemning the attitude of their governments. The decisions taken against Niger, Mali and Burkina. They are saying that, the kind of policies pursued by the French government is detrimental to them. So let's make the difference between the French, politicians, the French elite and the population. The sentiment is not against the French people, but it's against, the policies, pursued by the leaders. So people they hate this name Macron. They don't want to hear about it. Okay, their arrogance. And what is, quite sad is, most French officials, they tend to speak of Africa in terms of their property, which they don't want to lose. They clearly, this is something they clearly, claim. And, it's sad. So the sentiment, again, it's not against the French people, but it's against the French policies.
Okay. Yeah, the other question before you also go is, what about internal France itself? There are a lot of strong left-wing or progressive organizations in France. Have you gathered any information whether they are supporting, or what is their opinion about what is happening in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea?
Yes, that's a good question, because the reality is that when it comes to Africa, whether they are from the left or from the right, they seem, with a few exceptions, they share, if you more or less, the position of the government. And you'll hardly see people speak out among the political elite against the policies undertaken by the government. Okay, so I should think that they are all united to defend French interests, whether they are from the left or from the right. There are a few exceptions, not many.
I would like to.
Before Linus comes in, there was a second follow-up question on jihadist violence and whether there is any merit to the argument that France is fueling this jihadist extremist violence for their interest. Is there any evidence to that effect?
That's difficult. For sure, the majority of people in Burkina, in Niger, in Mali believe that the French are behind all this. And it's sad that, the military, you don't hear very much from them, but there have been cases, you do know that for a long time, before the French army military were driven away, before taking any action against the jihadists who have been located, you need permission from the French. That is, if our military, if they spot some jihadists, okay, before they go after them, they required permission from the French. And sometimes also, they may, when trying to go after them, on arrival, they will find that they are no longer there. They have vanished. Where did they get the information? So, I think there is this strong belief that, that they are certainly behind. And, when we consider the fact that we are landlocked countries, the weapons, no African country, we don't even, produce bullets, let alone, the guns and so on and so on. Where, do they get, the weapons, the armament? It's suspicious. And do you know that when the French military, when they were here, when the containers, through the airport, our customs cannot go near what they import. You never know what are in those containers. No one, can approach this. Okay, they import things, the goods. We don't know what's in there. So the people always say that they are the one who are, providing weapons to them. Okay, I think, it's a conviction. The material evidence, of course, will be difficult to give.
Has the French ambassador and the military left Mali? Niger?
No, the French military, they have left. They are no longer here.
They are not in Niger?
No, not yet in Niger.
What about the ambassador?
The ambassador is still there because, he had been ordered to leave. Macron said that he cannot, he won't leave. It's the same thing, they have ordered the military.
The 1,500 have left.
In Niger?
Yeah.
When was that? Must be.
I'm asking whether have they left the 1,500?
No, they haven't yet. Apparently they are negotiating. No, they haven't left yet. Okay,
okay.
But they have been ordered to leave. But in Burkina they have left. Only 2 days ago, and I think I sent this letter to Nicholas. The French military attaché at the embassy was also asked to leave Burkina because he is suspected of undertaking some subversive activities.
Okay.
So, Linus, go ahead, man.
Yeah, right. What I wanted to ask was, or highlight on was the jihadist violence. Every day, in spite of the presence of Wagner, who was supposed to go support this government, the governments in Mali and Burkina Faso, not yet Niger to my knowledge, but Mali, Burkina Faso, we won't talk about.
Wagner is not in Burkina yet.
No.
Wagner is not there yet?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Wagner is not here yet.
Yeah, but nevertheless, where they are in Mali, Mali is.
Yeah, they say in Mali, but not in Burkina.
Yeah, good. In Mali, news reports of losses. They continue to exert a lot of damage on the military and then civilians, and yet you have this Wagner still there. Now, apparently, their operations there are not exactly successful. That's why the government there continues to take continues to take so much losses. Now, there is also talk about them moving into Niger sometime. How soon, we don't know yet. And in case they move to Burkina, you know, the thing is that this Wagner was supposed to help the countries fight off jihadists, and yet their presence doesn't seem to have much impact. Now, Niger, I hear, is very much in favor of sometime inviting Wagner to as well, you know. And to me, my concern is Wagner is also, in my opinion, allowing Russia to stretch an arm into that region, because any leader soon, if Niger, for instance, begins to have difficulties, then the tendency is, or the temptation is to invite in Wagner. I do not know if Wagner continues to move into the region and consolidate. What implications will this have for the region? Because if it becomes a trend that any leader that experiences difficulties with security would have to turn to Wagner. Meanwhile, the French have left, and so what is going to be the overall security situation in the region? What will be its impact if Wagner continues to consolidate?
But can I make a quick response to that?
Yeah, just one point. You know, the questions I asked earlier, I put them up in the chat if anybody wants to look at them. All right. Okay, Nico, go ahead.
Yeah, a quick response to that. I did mention earlier on that when we are analyzing the situation in the Sahel and the West Africa region, we must be clear in our minds that it is framed in a global geopolitical struggle. And to that extent, the narrative that comes out is meant to pitch it in that sense. What do I mean? All of a sudden, Wagner is the bogey name that the Americans and the French and everybody's talking about. I was chatting with my Malian friends and asking, but wait a minute, why have you people brought in Wagner? He said to me, listen, the French have been here since the colonial era. All they do is protect their economic interest. They never want to go to the battlefront. We invited these people in, and the day before the other, they even showed us the equipment that they brought to support the fighting. We don't know what the French are doing. What I'm saying is this: we have to be careful that we don't fall into this global superpower politics and answer the question, which level of alliances are in the best interest of the people of the country, first and foremost. I do know that the French are claiming a right of intervention because of colonial history. Since 1885, when Africa was partitioned among a number of European countries, the continent has been hunting ground, and people have declared themselves a right to own bits of it. To that extent, we have to look at the historical roots of these alliances and the way they have played themselves out. It is of the interest of America, France, and everybody to cry foul to China, to cry foul to whoever, as long as they feel their interest threatened. The question I'm asking is, Wagner is not in Burkina. Why is that an issue? Let's not join and frame the issues in that sense. Let's look at what is actually happening to the ordinary people on ground, and to what extent are the leaders of those countries actually responding to the needs and interests of their people. I'll leave it at that.
Any other comrades who want to ask questions or come in? I see some of the newer comrades who joined the discussion. Apologies, we had some technical problems. We don't know what the cause was about getting into the meeting. So I hope you didn't have too much problem doing that. But welcome anyway. Any other comrades who'd like to come in? Just one quick question I had was one comrade was describing the conditions laid down by Victoria Nuland about the Americans being able to carry on with their drone base, and with the Niger government that she had those negotiations a few weeks ago, and also about Niger not allowing Wagner to come into their country. Were these conditions agreed by the Nigerian government, or were they just demands by Victoria Nuland? Anybody know the answer to that?
I stated that, and there is an article that was sent to me by Professor Yoda. The resumption of U.S. military activity in Niger puts France on the strategic back foot. And I asked myself, what could have, if this is accurate, that look, the French have publicly expressed frustration and anger at the U.S. for stabbing them in the back. That is no longer a secret. I hope you know that. Ian was also mentioning it about the way the French felt in the U.S. relationships in Australia over submarine, etc. Now, I was trying to figure out what might inform that approach if it is true. I'm guessing here. My guess is that the primary concern for the Niger authorities to avoid military intervention. And if patching a deal with the US eliminates that, that gives them a breathing space. Will that agreement stand going forward? I don't think so. If there is military intervention in either Niger, Sahel, or Mali, the agreement that they have signed requires of them to come to each other's assistance. And Wagner is in Mali. They will have a right to, you see, if you are a weak person and you have a bully boy in the playground, hey, you look for the next strongest person to ally yourself with, to protect yourself. Now, that is a reality that we may have to live with. I don't know. I don't think that the Wagner forces have any capacity to install themselves permanently they don't have any historical and institutional linkage. These are just people that are being used to protect regimes and in return get some rewards and payments, as has happened in the Central African Republic. But I've answered your question.
Yeah. Nico, one last thing. Could you, you talked about those shocking French conditions when these countries became independent, so-called. If you have a document, if you can post it if you can copy it into the at some point into the chat, or circulate through email, it doesn't matter.
I can, the 11 secret agreements between France and Africa. Professor Yoda sent them to me. If you go to YouTube and you type in Arikana, the Zimbabwean woman who was in the AU and got fired for screaming out against French influence, she has talked about them at length, and elaborated in detail the content.
Okay, so I'll chase you up on that, and then I'll circulate the information through the network. Okay, cheers, man. Mike, did you want to come in at this point?
Yes, I wanted to discuss this whole question about subjective and objective. I think it's a big discussion. In the global world, global village that we are dealing with, because I mean, this is a reality that we are faced with. The fact that we're able to talk to each other, living in different parts of the world, is fantastic. and the fact that we're able to actually educate. The discussion we're having here could have involved maybe 1,000 people all over the world. So the question of subjective and objective. Look, I was talking to my friend just now. She's of Jamaican origin. I told her I was coming on to this thing. She's a qualified pastor and lectures at one of the universities here. And the question of right and left is a very subjective factor in itself, because all the things she was talking about, I listened to her, were purely anti-colonial and anti-imperialist, because she was talking about question about a lot of our friends who've gone back to Ghana and to other African countries, and she's talking about the control of the natural resources of these countries and how they must be able to control it, manufacture it in their countries, package it and sell it abroad. So, I mean, that is what we're talking about here, socialism. I mean, these countries, Ghana, the whole of Africa and the Caribbean, and what we call the third world, are not able to get access to their resources and to be able to use it and manufacture it and make the final product and sell it. You can look at all the minerals, gold, diamond, bauxite, just name it. All the minerals are shipped abroad. Oil is shipped abroad, manufactured in these European countries and America, and it's not refined in these countries. That's what she was talking about. She went on and on. So this question about how do you then label people? She believes in God and all these type of things. But she talks really brilliantly, a really great speaker. You see, it brings me to the point that Yen and I spoke about yesterday, about broadening this international that we have here. Unless we do that and we bring people in, we're not going to make any impact. Our task is to intervene in these situations. The fact that Adams gave a good presentation, which he was reluctant to do, is a testimony to that, and the fact that he has connections with other farmers living in other parts of Africa shows the influence that we can have as a small group. But we need to extend this group. So the question of subjective and objective, Adams did say that there's the objective factors. Well, the objective factors have always been there, Adams, because people are poor, they're oppressed, they hate, they don't know who to hate. Sometimes they turn around, the masses hate themselves, or probably say that God has placed them in this situation that they can't get out of. That raises a question about the subjective factors. How do we intervene in these situations? That's what I think we need to discuss, because the discussion here becomes academic. If we don't have a plan of action, what are we planning to do, even if a minimum intervention, as Adams is trying to do in some of these countries? So we have to have a plan. We have to bring together connections and begin to influence, or to become a talk shop.
Thanks, Mike.
But can I respond to that, or will Yen like to respond to it, or anybody else?
Perhaps, Nico, if you could hold your fire, see if anybody else wants to come in.
Okay.
And then you can respond to a couple of people, maybe, yeah? I see Roy is there. Roy, you missed, unfortunately, the first part, didn't you, of the meeting? So it might be difficult for you to intervene, but is there any questions you had that you wanted to address to Nico?
Well, I think you mentioned the BRICS and people have mentioned the sort of hegemony and all the rest of it, and the fight back against that with BRICS is, and it clearly from some of the discussions we have, it's not the cavalry coming to save us all, because there's command and uneven development is live and kicking all over the world, and the things that have been reported about the different aspects of like the military being involved, and then what happens then, and as well as fighting global hegemony, we're also fighting global poverty, and countries are going to react in a way that suits them. And I suppose when Mike was talking about how we can be involved, I mean, I think Pat's position of picking up the issue of China and dealing with that and trying to influence China and the BRICS, if we can in any way, is also an important factor, because it's only those socialists, or only that perspective of the if economies being dominated by the public sector, are we going to achieve anything? And perhaps I suppose if you're asking me a question, then it's things like the comments that have already been made about Russia's involvement, and even the Belt and Road Initiative, because we get this kind of respect from China that they don't get involved politically with anybody. They'll come in, they'll do the quote, do the job, and go back again. And I think I was reading something where there's literally thousands of private Chinese companies operating in Africa. And so it's not a simple answer to all this about how we get involved, because there's so many dimensions to what's going on politically in the world. And I suppose in Africa it would be, well, you know, I'd imagine probably most of the African population are not even aware about bloody BRICS or the same as it is in the rest of the world. The main population are not given information. They take their information from the media and from the neoliberal press. So it's a big struggle for us. But yeah, I suppose the question is what is the influence? Can anyone confirm, you know, what the role of Russia is, and the Russians' involvement, and the Chinese involvement, and how progressive is that? Yeah, just on that point, Roy, just to say something about that. With I want to give the experience of Brazil, because the thing is, the private Chinese companies don't offer a way forward, generally speaking. They just operate like capitalist companies, as Nico's talked about how they come in and try to get the maximum profit, extract what wealth they can at the cheapest price, the cheapest labor, the usual story of capitalists. And sometimes they can be even more rapacious than capitalists of the West. What we have to be looking towards is publicly led initiatives. And this is where China's initiative, Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS and so on, could play a role. So in Brazil, what happened when Lula first got elected as president in the early 2000s, what enabled him to have a very successful presidency was China. There's no question about it. And how did that happen? That you had government to government negotiations. And so it was public sector led. And the government was able to secure much better prices for their raw materials of food and iron ore and so on from that we export here from Brazil, and on longer term contracts. And the advantage of the longer term contracts was that if you have short term contracts, then you become, there's massive fluctuations in the raw materials and food markets internationally. And if you have short term contracts, then you're at the mercy of the buyers, that if you happen to be negotiated in a period of low prices, they then take advantage of you and you can't do anything about it. But if you have much longer term contracts, you can stabilize your income. You can, and especially if you do them at a reasonable time, you can
you can get much better prices over a longer period and even out the fluctuations of the commodity markets. And that's what happened with Brazil. So as a result, the Brazilian government was able to get much better and more stable incomes. And through that, President Lula was able to institute the Bolsa Familia program, which supplied a basic level of income to every poor family in Brazil. And that was a great step forward in reducing poverty and inequality in the country. And it also allowed the government to afford to do many changes in housing, water management, etc., that were crucial to the poor people. And so that was why when Lula finished his 2 terms as president, he had for any large country, he had the biggest, the greatest support levels among the population, something like 80% or something. I can't remember the exact figure now. That had been recorded by in many major country of a departing president. And already since Lula's come to power at the beginning of this year, we're starting to see again. We had this period of Bolsonaro, the right-wing president, where he didn't do these deals much with China. He didn't break off all the relationships because Brazil has become very interlocked with the Chinese economy, but he didn't actually pursue much. And then, of course, we had the pandemic. But now that China is actually kind of recovering with a kind of growth of about 5.5%, Brazil is gaining from that. So we start to see 4% growth in the Brazilian economy after a massive fall under the right-wing president. So this is an example, and there could be many more, whereby if a country, not through the Chinese private companies, but through the public sector, could actually get much better prices for its raw materials and its agricultural products and so on, working with China, and also we don't just make this focused on China, because the whole idea of the BRICS is that China is exporting the many aspects of its model through the BRICS and helping get the BRICS countries together to plan how to raise the living standards of their different member countries. And in that context, perhaps there's some hope for these countries in West Africa that are throwing off the yoke of French neo-imperialism. And if you think about it, if you don't have some kind of link up internationally, how the hell are they going to get out of this? As Nico said, it's a pretty bleak economic future if they're just relying only on their own resources and they don't have any link up with friendly governments who are willing to discuss possibility of better prices and better arrangements. And this can also apply to things about agriculture. I mean, I don't have time to go into that, but there are many aspects of the Chinese experience which they're willing to work with governments to take advantage of their model. It's not just about infrastructure, it's not just about raw material costs, but also other aspects of the economy that could gain from this link up with China and other countries internationally. So just to bring in the Brazilian experience. I see Max is not muted. Max, did you have anything to say? Did you want to say anything in this discussion?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
A couple of things. I don't think that things are going to change significantly for third world countries unless and until we take ownership of our resources. Currently, like Ghana, like other countries, operates a concession model where we take a fraction of the value of the resource, and the bulk of the value goes overseas. And it's like running a business where you continually give away your profits. You have no capital buildup with which to reinvest in your economy, your people, your infrastructure, and so on, in order to grow. So until we reverse the situation and basically look at a nationalization kind of model where we own the resource and we pay others to come and extract the resource for us, yeah, so that we own the profits that come from selling the resource, then we are not going to get very far. And perhaps BRICS can help give some protection in this kind of scenario. I mean, Saudi Arabia did not progress beyond desert until they took ownership of their oil. And I don't see why the global south cannot, as a policy, start doing this rather than ceding the value of our resources to external agents. That's point number one I want to make. Point number two is that I think we are missing a critical opportunity here in Africa, where we have a highly youth-oriented population, many of whom are totally disaffected with the current status quo and see no future, hence all the immigration to Europe and other parts of the world. And yet I don't see that there's a Pan-African movement tapping into that zeitgeist to basically mobilize the youth to start to make greater demands on the political process, on the political establishment. And I think that if one looks at South Africa, for example, I'm surprised that Julius Malema isn't here on this forum because he's very outspoken, and I think he has his heart and head in the right place. There's a very strong chance that come next year's elections in South Africa, the EFF are going to make a pretty good showing, okay, because the ANC is not delivering. And the EFF have been very consistent in the articulation of challenges that the country faces and the solutions to those challenges. And I think that there's an opportunity here for other countries in Africa to look at this model and essentially create an EFF type franchise, okay, where that rhetoric, that model, those objectives are sold to the young people in other African countries. So it is not a movement that is restricted to one country, but it is across the continent. Okay, so there's a model established, and then the various movements within the different countries can support others, their colleagues in other countries as elections come up, so that the youth start to gain a greater voice in what is going on in their countries. And if, you know, EFF, for example, does not win outright, but gets a controlling majority in parliament, it can then start to dictate the agenda for development and for the restructuring of the economy in order to stop exporting jobs and to create jobs internally for the people of the country. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Max. Excellent. Socialist solution, I think that comes under the heading of.
Yeah. Isn't that what this forum is about?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. Just in response to that, to the comrades who haven't participated in our network meetings before, one of the things we've been working on for a long time is precisely new elements of a program for implementing socialism, not just in the richer countries, but in the developing world. And perhaps we can circulate some of those ideas, which are fresh and original. For example, we have a program for a new model for the public sector and for nationalization, which is not based on the old bureaucratic top-down model, which didn't work very well, although it was better than the capitalist model, but in some regards, but not as efficient perhaps or as dynamic. But we've got a much better, I think, a more original way of involving, democratizing the public sector, and involving the people who are actually customers, the workforce, and so on, who are affected by these things, to make them more efficient and more dynamic than even the capitalist model, and certainly to act in our interests rather, which the capitalist ones don't. So that's one example.
I hear you, and I'm aware of that model. Actually, I'm involved in business that provides state-of-the-art metering for utility, and especially in the electrical sector. And what this particular technology allows is what I call democratization of the network, such that, you know, groups of people, individuals, can own parts of the network. So you own your neighborhood network, for example, because it's a system that has multiple levels, and it can be, it's highly atomized, and it can be disaggregated down to the level of individual transformers and so on. So you can own the transformer in your neighborhood, okay, and the energy that goes through, and who gets what, and what your tariff structures are, and so on and so forth. It's a level of control that is completely unprecedented, has never been available before. But that technology is available today. And I actually tried to get our government interested in it, because at one point they were talking about democratizing the energy supply, but in ways which were more capitalist than actually socialist. So I'm with you on that. There are different ways of thinking.
It's all in the implementation, isn't it? Whether it's, I mean, we as socialists, we're in favor of decentralization at the same time as having democratic control at all levels, centrally, regionally, locally. So there's a lot of possibilities now with the newer technology.
Well, that's another module actually that I'm developing called fractal governance, which is to do with having it's a democratic model, but it has control at multiple levels again, involving people at that level.
Sure.
So from communities all the way up to continents.
Hold on, Semos, I see you there. Did you have any questions, or you wanted to make any contribution from Cyprus?
Well, I'm reluctant to do that because I joined late because of some problems with the connection. Yeah. It turned out to be that the problem was the wrong meeting ID was inserted in the link, and I missed the first half an hour. But anyway, it seems to have been a very important meeting, this one we had. I think it was one of the best we had up to now. And one or two comments I would like to make is that, of course, there are difficulties in these countries we are talking about, and in any country that has all these problems of development. But I would look for a more internationalist and more aggressively internationalist thinking, in the sense that if we see these sub-Saharan countries alone, it's the situation is hopeless. But only recently you had the Arab Spring, and you have it spread like wildfire in northern Africa. We have the South Africa, which is a pretty advanced country. So a sort of socialist approach, a socialist revolution could spread like quite successfully throughout the continent. And this link up, I think, is the most important thing that we should look for. I mean, I don't expect that it's possible to have a socialist country by itself. I mean, that's in today's world is impossible. It was impossible at the time of the Russian Revolution. It's much more so today. But there are possibilities, and I think what we have today is encouraging. I was also impressed by the last speaker speaking about specific models of running things, democratizing things, and this is what we need. I mean, it's the sort of work that we have been missing for a long time. So, I'm waiting to hear the whole the whole presentation and discussion on the on the internet from the posting that I hope we'll have soon. And also, I would be very interested to have contact information from about the participants, so that we could probably exchange ideas and see what these programs are, because they are really vital for what we are doing.
Thanks, Amos. And Nico, did you want to come back at this point? You're muted at the moment.
I was saying that just to say that it's time for me to leave, and if there was no burning issue that I had to respond to, I think I've given my penny's worth. So,
okay. Okay. Well, is there anybody, before Nico disappears, is there anybody who wants to put a direct question to him? One question, Nico, I had raised earlier, was about, do you think that Pan-Africanism, which I know the comrades, the Ghanaian comrades have long held, been championing for for decades. Do you feel that there is a growing support for the idea of Pan-Africanism now in the present situation?
Oh, most certainly. There is a certain reawakening of the need for Africa to unite and chart its own destiny. There are some young people that I've been talking to, and they all share the same perspective. What I've been trying to encourage them to do is to have linkages with people in neighboring African countries, keep regular contact in the traditions of the 1945 Manchester Conference, where being the diaspora enabled the early independence fighters to come together and fashion out a future for their respective countries within the context of a united Africa. The real challenge now that we face in Africa is there's a very serious language divide. Many people are unable to operate. When I say many people, I'm talking about the political class, those who organize and who mobilize, either do not speak French or do not speak Portuguese, do not speak Spanish. There's a language barrier that is hindering that process. However, at the economic level, a lot of young people are connecting economically, doing things together than it has been the case before. The challenge now is to try and see how, from the economic connections that are emerging, there can be a political consciousness of trying to work together as one group rather than representing separate countries. The bottom line, however, is that when you don't have political leadership in the respective countries willing to bite the bullet and to say the balkanization of our continent is not helping us, let's end it now. We will forever be talking about Pan-Africanism and be far away from it.
I mean, Nico, would do you think that there is space here for a kind of a statement of basic, like principles? Because obviously each country, each region have got its own individual circumstances and problems, but there are some basic principles which the BRICS is putting forward, but perhaps could be a bit fleshed out and made a bit sharper. Do you think that could be a worthwhile project to develop a set of those kind of principles that would then be a good basis for getting this kind of Pan-African movement, reviving it better?
Until I see the text, it's very difficult for me to give an opinion. All I can say is that we have to move beyond text and try and ensure that at various national levels, you have people emerging in leadership who are prepared to say, listen, this has gone on for too long. For example, the initiatives being taken by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso is heartwarming. I don't know how far they can go, but they are talking about a common currency, a common central bank. These are the things that Nkrumah talked about in 1960. Mm-hmm. They have declared that an attack on each or any of them is an attack on all. This is a common defense policy. Whether many other countries will join is a different question altogether. But in terms of raising the consciousness of the need for this, most certainly yes. The younger generation, I think, are increasingly committed to the Pan-Africanist ideal. It's just how to realize it, which is the main challenge now. So bring the BRICS statement and let's see what happens.
But the main reason why ECOWAS did not made any attempt to invade Niger or any of those countries is because you will have serious repercussions within places like Nigeria or Ghana. Ian and I were discussing this yesterday, because the masses, and I want to review this when the topic which was the revolt in Africa. It is a revolt, and we have to change the language. We can't use the same language that the imperialist media are using and call it a coups. You see, we are living in a different age. They as at times outlined in his original remarks, that military officers have moved because the rank and file officers within these armies, and we have to see it differently. We have to do more research and have more analysis. I can tell you about my own country, Guyana, where the rank and file officers are up in arms against the hierarchy, because remember, they're not isolated from their families. They come from working class background. 90% of the people in these armies, and in fact, they join the army, Africa in the Caribbean, because they can't find jobs, and they can't, and their living conditions are terrible, and their families are not able to support their families. So we have to reconsider this situation where, I mean, when Libya and Gamal Abdel Nasser took power, they were military men, and they made tremendous. Look at Chavez in Venezuela. So we have to look at it differently. Chavez used to hunt down the guerrillas in the hills of Venezuela, and he became internationally known. Unfortunately, he died. But we're living in a new era. We need to, unfortunately, the comrades, the comrades in Pakistan need to make a contribution to this discussion, because they're faced with a similar situation where the military have always played a crucial role in their politics. And so we need to review the situation. And I disagree with that. We need to come up with some minimum program which can be easily produced with the support of the Ghanaian comrades and the other comrades here from parts of Africa. A minimum program talking about the situation there and what could be done. I mean, the very fact that these countries have come together, those who have overthrown the so-called constitutional governments, and they have they have decided that they were going to sign a pact to defend themselves, is a progressive step forward, which will move across to Africa like wildfire. There is a major economic crisis in Africa, and we can't isolate it from what is happening, Pat, in what the Chinese are doing. Chinese are very conscious. They're not sitting on the wayside, just not doing anything, and the Russians too. They are doing things, and we may not know what they're doing, but certainly they're not sitting on the wayside. So we need to we need to, when I say we need to intervene, we need to first of all discuss what, with the governments from Africa in particular, who will lead this the leadership there in Africa. What are the most important economic things that are affecting the people of Africa, and put up a minimum, at least a minimum program, and then we can have that on the internet and share it around and have a wider discussion. It's a very crucial period in the history of Africa, and you can't sit by and just allow things to go. We have to intervene.
So I don't know if the comrades feel out of these points that have come up, whether we should have a meeting on Pan-Africanism and try to invite to it as many contacts as we have across Africa to discuss these questions, and starting with what they are already doing. You know, I mean, what documents they've already got, what platforms they've got, what activities they're taking, and then see if there are any gaps in that we could help fill. What do the comrades think about that? Do they think that would be a good initiative to take? I mean, it might take us a while to set up such a meeting. It might take us a few months to do it, to make it worthwhile, to get a good representation of people, because there are, you know, I come across on YouTube, you know, socialist voices from Zambia and Ethiopia and other places, and as the comrade said earlier, from South Africa. Would that be a good initiative that we as a network could take, pulling together some of these voices to assess the way forward and what's been done, what needs more to be done? Does that sound like a good idea? Yen, what do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, basically, we have to share knowledge. This is a discussion that we have begun. I mean, there are quite a number of groups that do have this Pan-African meetings, but the major problem that we are facing is that these are not brought together. You know, we are all working in isolation.
Right.
We in Ghana, the progressive forces are, we're trying with we have a party, Progressive Alliance for Ghana, a political party, and we are waiting. We have to go through the bourgeois system because you can't declare a party unless you are accepted by the Electoral Commission. And we are going through that process. It's a Pan-Africanist party. It is a revolutionary socialist party. So it would be good to share some of the ideas, you know, with these people. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we can help in that, then definitely, I think. What do other comrades feel? Do they think it would be good?
Here too, quite a number of people who have attended this meeting belongs to that party. Atams belongs to the party. Max belongs to the party. Hilary belongs to the party. There is a woman here called Gloria. She belongs to the party. So about 4 or 5 of us here. How many? Yeah, 4 of us belong to that party in Ghana, Progressive Alliance for Ghana. Yeah.
So Gloria, I see Gloria in our list. Gloria, I had a brief chat with her on messaging to see if she could sort out her microphone speaker problems. Gloria, did you sort out anything on that in the end? Were you able to get it working? You're muted at the moment.
She's muted, yeah.
You're muted. So if you click on the mute button down in the bottom left-hand corner, then if your microphone's working, then we could hear you. Or you can send us a message if you like in the chat if you're having problems. Anyway.
You did ask a question about the Pakistani comrades. They also have this military that has been intervened in. What is their views on the military issue?
Yeah, Kabir or Sajjad, did you want to say anything about that?
I think it's better to Kabir say something about them.
Okay.
Because my English is not so good.
Okay. Kabir, would you like to say something? Great.
Thank you, comrade.
Are there any parallels? Do you find any parallels with what we've been discussing about West Africa and Africa as a whole? Do you see any parallels with the situation in Pakistan at all?
Thank you very much, comrade. It was very pleasant for me, especially to hear the comrades from the Africa. And we remain very unfortunate that on the international mainstream politics, we have been lacking the information about the African countries and the societies and the left movements. But first of all, I would request Comrade Nicholas and the comrades Mike, Rahman, and other comrades, if they can do one thing, that we need a detailed document which should be written on the African situation, because it's good to have a discussion upon it, but if there is a proper writing with the details and from every aspect of the things, that would be better to understand the situation, what is going on exactly in the African countries. As far as the similarity is concerned, what I think that the impacts of the new liberal economic policies have the similar impact on the African countries and the Pakistan and the other third world countries, as we are going through a situation particularly which is having the problem of the high inflation of the petroleum products. Energy crisis is going on, high inflation in the energy is also going on. And there is a movement going on in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is called the Azad Kashmir in the local terminologies. And that is against the high inflation and the taxes on the electricity, and that is on the high inflation against the flow and the other things which are fundamental needs for the society. As far as the similarity of the military coups are concerned, what I think, there is a big difference between the African countries and the Pakistan particularly. Because whenever there was a coup in the Pakistan, that always remained the right-wing pro-American and the US coup. And there remained only one example, that remained the pro-people sentiment and the program and the radical movement that remained in 1968 and 69, which was led by the Pakistan People's Party, and the leader was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And that was having the program of the socialism, and one can say that Pakistan People's Party was that was not exactly the Social Democratic Party, but that was very near and the very popular phenomena, and that was near to the social democracy, that was having such a character. And after that movement, even as far as comrades of the Africa, they were discussing that jihadis are being used to divide and to divert the situation in the Africa. And the same was the case here. Nationalism was provoked, and the Pakistani state was partitioned and divided on the nationalist line in order to divide the working class movement. But instead of that division and the partition, because after that movement of the 1968 and 69, Bangladesh was formed after the division of the Pakistani state. And that was, of course, on the nationalist line, and that was up to some extent, if the Pakistan army was not supporting that directly in the words of the sport, but that was creating such an atmosphere that that was pushing and pulling the situation towards the division on the nationalist lines. Instead of that division in 1970-71, and there was a defeat to the Pakistan army by the people of the Bangladesh, and ultimately because the Bangladesh was quite adjacent to the Indian state as well, because Bengal population is both sides of the India and Pakistan on the both sides. So the ruling class of the India, they were also feared of that movement which was having the class character in itself. So they intervened as well. So there was a war, and after that war, another country was formed in the name of the Bangladesh. But even going through those all of the situations and the calamity, the intensity of movement that could not be defeated, and Pakistan army was compelled to hand over the power to the Pakistan People's Party, and after that there was a big nationalization, particularly the high commands of the economy, and during that process, the living standard of the people that was increased as well. Permanent jobs were given to the people, pensionable jobs were given to the people, free education was given to the people, free health was given to the people. But after 5 or 6 years, when the Pakistan army was again stabled after that crisis, that again attacked the Pakistan People's Party government, and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was hanged. And after that, there was a long era of the army dictatorship, which was led by the General Zia. And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was hanged, and then the black era was starting. After that, we are facing the problem of the new economic era and the policies which were imposed, and now we are very badly suffering from the situation as the situation is going on in Africa. So it was the conditions are the same, and the very rightly Comrade Nicholas pointed out, and particularly Comrade Rahman pointed out as well, that the thing which is lacking, that is, even though the objective conditions are very much ripe up, and people are not in a position to bear all these attacks which are made by the ruling classes after imposing the new liberal economic policies. People, up to some extent, on different corners, they are trying to fight out the situation. As I early said that there is a movement going on in Kashmir. But the thing which is missing at this time, that is the subjective factor. And of course, on every corner of the world, we are facing the same situation. And that situation is the lack of the leadership, lack of the progressive leadership, the lack of the Marxist leadership and the cadre. And that's why the things are being very much complicated. If one movement is, we have recently 5-6 years back, 3-4 years back, we have seen the situation in the Middle East and other countries, Arab Spring, which we called. So what was lacking there, the same situation was going on there, and the same is going on in Africa. But I want to know exactly that the coups which are taking place in African countries, as we have heard that they are having the the left-wing orientation. Is that correct that one character in those coups is the anti-imperialist stance and the second character is the radical and the left orientation? Is that true? This is my question to the comrade. So at the end, I would say that I would request comrades, particularly from the Africa, if they could write a detailed document on the situation of the Africa. And the second thing which I want to say, that we need to intervene in the situations, and we need to plan how to intervene in the situation, and that is the only way through which we can build up an international organization. Otherwise, if we could just keep up the discussions, so we will having the discussion clubs character, not more than this. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thanks, Kabir. Okay.
Just briefly,
go ahead, man.
Yeah, briefly, what? The coups. We can understand that in Pakistan. I mean, the military hierarchy invariably is pro US. Yeah, in the three countries, the rhetoric is towards the left. Particularly the Burkina Faso. If you listen to the leader in Moscow when they went, Mali and then Niger, the rhetoric, the progressive rhetoric is there, but the extent to which they will be able to uphold these ideas, the extent to which America and then France influence, as we talked about, the subjective factors that are lacking, and also the fact that the left is fragmented. To what extent can they hold on? But at present, we can say that they are patriots. We have had in Ghana, I mean, it was honestly, when these coups occurred, I had to revise my situation, because at one time I believed that the worst form of a civilian government is better than the most progressive military takeover, due to the experience that we had with the Rawlings regime, that it began by being claiming to be progressive and became right-wing and slaughtered a lot of people. But with these three coups, I'm revising my position, not 100% pro-military military coup, but as Mike said, you can also call them uprising because of the support they are getting from the public. But to what extent can we build the subjective factors to support what is the ongoing process?
Thanks, Yen. I mean, that's an issue which we've addressed in these papers we've done on China. That the so-called liberal democracies of the West are being exposed as fake democracies increasingly in the eyes of people all over the world. And this is particularly the case. Obviously, the poorer the country, the worse the conditions, the more obvious the contradiction between the promises of liberal democracy and their failure to deliver them, and the way that they just become clearly a means by which the rich are able to control the political process, by buying politicians, buying media, parties, and bribery and all the rest of it. So as a result, I think more and more people are becoming cynical about these electoral systems, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a series of other coups that happen because of that cynicism. The problem is that there's no alternative being posed, except in what we're trying to do in our network, but there's no alternative being posed yet in China or anywhere else to liberal democracy. They're not putting forward an alternative, a real form of democracy, and that I think is a vacuum that's developing. And in the absence of that, there's a tendency for other kind of means of overthrowing these regimes come to the fore, like the army, or could be some other way of doing it. I don't know. Maybe some more radical parties could come to the fore. But I take the point that Kabir is asking, and what we'll try to do is, rather than demanding a full document from the comrades in Africa, in Ghana, if they can do that, it would be great. But the least we could do is any articles they publish or whatever, if they can let us have them, we can circulate them, get them broader circulation. And of course, we've had a discussion in the network during the course of this year about the use of YouTube channels, and I'm launching one in the new year on China, and maybe the comrades, I know the comrades in Ghana have thought it was beyond their limitations at the moment, but perhaps there's something that could be done there. I noticed on YouTube a number of channels are popping up that are covering issues in Africa from a more radical perspective, and we could link up with those people as well. Anyway, these are just some thoughts. So I think there's I don't know if the comrades, I suggested this idea, maybe we could get something on Pan-Africanism going in the next few months. Do the comrades generally agree with that? So we can continue this discussion, not as Kabir made the point, not as a talking shop or Mike made the point, but with a point of leading on to something, to concrete. The comrades happy about that idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
All right. So, comrades, time is now, we started about half an hour late. So I think we've had a good session, just over an hour and a half. And I think there's thank the comrades for attending. And we had about, I think, 16 comrades participating. And some of the comrades from our own network weren't able to get in because of these technical difficulties, like Khalid couldn't get in. He organized the meeting, but so it was ironic, wasn't it? All right, so thanks very much, comrades.
Before you go,
yeah, Mike,
if you can share it to us, you recorded it.
Yeah, I will definitely. Yeah, it's recording, and I'll cut off the empty stuff at the beginning.
Yes,
and I'll Nico's introduction and the discussion definitely we'll circulate. All right.
I want to suggest that.
Yeah.
I want to suggest that we.
Who's that? Who's that calling?
I managed to make it into the meeting. Yeah.
All right. Okay. I can't see you in the list though.
Okay.
Well, how's that then? I can't see you on that list.
I don't know, but I follow the whole. I hear the whole meeting. Yeah. I was.
Oh, excellent! Great. Well, that's good.
He has a Chinese name.
Yeah.
Oh, you're listed as. Are you listed as Xiaomi MI10?
Yes, he's a secret agent.
Is that how you're listed?
Yes.
Yeah, because what you can do, by the way, is you can right-click on your name in the YouTube, in the Zoom, and you can rename yourself. You can rename yourself, because if you don't do that, what happens is you appear as the mobile phone or the laptop or whatever the technical name of that device appears. If you don't.
Yes.
Okay. I will do that. Yeah. Okay.
Just as we were saying,
Mike. Sorry.
If Atams is listening,
I think Atams had to go to do something else, so he did warn me that he could only do it about. And it's not his fault. We started half an hour late, so.
I will discuss with Yen and him and I, because Yen is in London, so I'm here in London too. So we'll probably meet tomorrow and come up with some suggestions and post it into the
definitely right
for discussion. So then we can take it from there. We can have a little discussion with you, Pat, if you want,
sure.
Later in the day, me and Yen, with you.
Yeah, okay. Why not?
Yeah, very good.
All right, man. Okay, thanks very much, comrades. And I'll make sure that the recording is up for the next couple of days, and we'll circulate it also to the Ghanaian comrades. They can circulate it among their comrades. I think, although we had these technical problems at the beginning, I think it worked out well in the end. The meeting was good. Cheers, comrades.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, comrades.
Thank you.
We will say,
okay, bye.
We will say good night because we are having night here.
Yeah.